This is in no way my attempt to justify my comic book obsession. And this story, I really, really like. Artwork, the storytelling. Hello and welcome to another episode of The Pull List, your source for all things comic book and comic book related on YouTube. My name is Travis, and today I'd like to talk about this little beauty, Marvel's newly reprinted Miracleman #1. I don't know if you know anything about Miracleman, this is definitely not a new series. I should probably give you a little bit of backstory. In 1953, Fawcett Comics, the US publisher of Captain Marvel, discontinued the series because they were sued by DC Comics. In the UK, rather than stopping production on Captain Marvel, they decided to turn to comic writer Mick Anglo to reimagine the series in some way. They transformed Captain Marvel into Marvelman, who was incredibly similar. A young reporter named Mickey Moran encounters an astrophysicist who gives him atomic powers. To transform into Marvelman, he says the word Kamota, which is atomic, phonetically, backwards. Much like Captain Marvel's Shazam. Captain Marvel had Captain Marvel Jr. and Mary Marvel. Marvelman had Young Marvelman and Kid Marvelman. And they had fairly typical superhero adventures for superheroes in the 50s. That series ran until 1963. In 1982, Alan Moore revived a dark, postmodern version of the character. Moore had been fascinated with the idea of a grown-up Michael Moran. This version of Moran was introduced being married, plagued with migraines, and having dreams of flying, and he had no idea why. Moore touches on a lot of the themes that end up influencing a lot of his future works, such as a superhero as a source of terror, the sympathetic villain, and exploring the mythology of an established fictional character. When Moran becomes Miracleman for the first time, he remembers all of these adventures that he's gone on, but his wife finds these adventures ridiculous. She doesn't believe any of it. Moran discovers that Johnny Bates, Kid Marvelman, has lived on and he even had his powers intact. But he finds out that Bates was corrupted by his superpower and became a sociopath. In 1985, Eclipse began reprinting Marvelman stories, but relettering it as Miracleman because they were threatened to be sued by Marvel Comics, but more on that later. Moore's version of Miracleman included carnage that had never been seen in superhero comics ever. Seriously, it includes the most violently destructive superhero battle of comic history. One character unleashes a murderous, vengeful holocaust in London just to get Miracleman's attention. Alan Moore's story arc ended in issue 16. Neil Gaiman picked up in issue 17. Gaiman developed Miracleman into the 90s, planning out his 3 books, The Golden Age, Silver Age, and The Dark Age. But then, Eclipse went bankrupt in 1994, which ceased the publication of Miracleman as we know it. Right in the middle of Neil Gaiman's run, never even got to finish the story, it ended with issue number 25. Issue number 25 was created, but it was never printed. Now, one of the most interesting parts about this series is the ownership. The legal battles are just so convoluted. Creator Mick Anglo has always claimed full rights of Marvelman. But in 1966, L. Miller sold the rights to Allen Class. But in 1982, when Warrior magazine reintroduced the character, the rights were split into 4. Alan Moore, Gary Leach, Quality Commons, and Des Skin, who was the editor of Warrior magazine. But later, Skin admitted that he never actually bought the rights ever. When artist Alan Davis took over the series, he was given Gary Leach's chunk. But like I said earlier, in 1983, Marvel Comics threatened to sue, so they changed the name to Miracleman. Apparently, Marvel Comics objected to any competitor using the word Marvel in any sort of title. In 1985, Eclipse Comics bought the rights and changed it from Marvelman to Miracleman to make Marvel Comics happy. Davis, saying he didn't want to deal with the situation anymore, just gave his rights to Leach. When Alan Moore completed his story in issue number 16, and Eclipse Comics said that they wanted to keep going with the character, Alan Moore gave the rights to Neil Gaiman, who continued writing the story. Gaiman took his rights and divided them between himself and artist Mark Buckingham. And then Eclipse went bankrupt, and like I said, Gaiman never got to finish his story. In 1996, Todd McFarlane purchased all of Eclipse's creative assets, including, supposedly, Miracleman, for a total of $40,000. In 2001, McFarlane introduced Miracleman's alter ego, Mike Moran, in Hellspawn number 6. He had every intention of bringing Miracleman himself into Hellspawn issue number 16. Although this never came to pass because the lawsuit was filed before the book could be published. What lawsuit? I'll feed you, baby birds. In 2002, Neil Gaiman sued Todd McFarlane for unauthorized use of Miracleman and characters that Neil Gaiman had created for Todd McFarlane's Spawn series, including Angela the Angel, but that's for another video. According to Neil Gaiman, the rights for Miracleman were not included in the Eclipse purchase that Todd McFarlane had made. However, the court made no ruling on Miracleman assets, and Todd McFarlane still claimed to own the Miracleman trademark. In 2002, Gaiman wrote the 1602 series for Marvel, and profits from that series went to aid the legal battle that he was fighting Todd McFarlane for Miracleman. Gaiman's dedication to the collected editions of 1602 reads, in part, to Todd for making it necessary, presumably referring to Todd McFarlane. Ooh, that's a nerd burn. And at the San Diego Comic-Con in 2009, Marvel announced that they had purchased the rights to Marvelman from the original creator Mark Anglo, which is all great and all. I mean, Anglo's stories are cute and they're campy, but most people really wanted to know about Moore's work and Gaiman's work. Were they ever going to be republished? Were they ever going to be reprinted? Anything like that? And at the New York Comic-Con in 2013, Marvel announced that they had solidified the rights to Miracleman and purchased the rights from every single person on the planet, because that's how many people it seems owned this property at one time. Oh my god, they shelled out like seriously 7 figures to get these rights. And the best part was that they had the rights to reprint Miracleman, and Neil Gaiman had signed on to finish the story arc which he had started 25 years earlier. So I'm making this entire video about Miracleman, and you might be wondering, why is Miracleman so important? Miracleman is a story of a superhero who, by his definition and the world's reaction of him, ends up changing the entire world around him into something completely unrecognizable. Miracleman and his allies end up being compared to as gods as they try to form the world into some sort of totalitarian utopia. This wasn't some Scooby-Doo monster of the week and then at the end of the issue everything goes back to being honky-dory like we know it. No, Miracleman was changing the world as it goes. It was turning into something that it was scary. Both DC and Marvel have toyed with the ideas of superheroes ruling the Earth, but they're always what-ifs or else-world stories, and it never really messed with the status quo. Miracleman decided that the best way to keep the world safe is to literally become a god, dismantling the world's governments, the weapons, trying to make everything into this straight-laced utopia. The result is an Earth without poverty, war, inequality, with Miracleman looking down from the heavens as a lord and savior. It basically paved the way for everything that came later. All the praise and the criticism that Watchmen gets, Marvelman has a claim on that first. Written by a nobody in the 80s, Alan Moore was Warrior's third choice to write the comic. And this is the comic that got Alan Moore noticed by America. It's kind of a big deal. Which brings us to this, Marvel's Miracleman #1. 20 years after the last Miracleman was on the shelves, it's back. Alan Moore's story will be told over the next year and a half, with Gaiman picking up for the next year and a half, with many of us reading Miracleman for the very first time. I, for one, am very interested with following along with the story, picking it up issue by issue, and then seeing how Gaiman ends up completing his story arc. I mean, he definitely isn't exactly the same writer that he was 25 years ago. After nearly 3 decades, I wonder if the story inside of his head has changed at all. Let me know in the comments down below if you have any interest in reading this series. Maybe this video piqued your interest a little bit? Anyway, that's it for this episode of The Pull List. Thank you for fueling my comic book obsession. You'll see more of me soon.
Hey guys, check the link below. Check out the Kickstarter. It's a great project. Tour to Comic Shop. I was the first donor. You should be the next one.
I'm going to keep all of that in there.